it's a system that allows the people to choose what they want and allows people freedom.
So why can't I choose Sharia? When in Rome, overthrow Caesar, implement the Sharia.
In your home, you can do whatever you want.
But what about in the public? Why can't I tell you to cover up? Am I free to say that?
Because it would be outrageous.
So where's my freedom? Where's my freedom?
You can say it to me, but
okay, so cover up. Wear the hijab.
That's absurd.
Who hasn't noticed that leftists have no qualms scorning Christians and treating Christianity as a hostile force while bending over backwards to defend Islam? Now, I get someone denouncing a religion that's in opposition to their own ideals, including criticizing its followers. But why have contempt for one religion while cradling another that's even more conservative, even more incompatible with liberal principles? Take Linda Sarsour, for example. She's a pro-Hamas, pro-Sharia Islamist, yet a darling of the left. And considering that there's nothing liberal, progressive, or feminist about Hamas, the Sharia, or Islam, this alliance can seem a little baffling until you take a closer look at what leftists actually believe. Leftist ideology is based on equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity. And just for the record, equality of opportunity is not identical opportunity for everyone, which is impossible, but means personal characteristics like nationality, race, religion, and sex should not determine the public opportunities that are available to someone, only talent and achievement. On the other hand, equality of outcome is based on the premise that everyone should end up the same. And here's the crux. Leftists believe if people don't end up the same, then something unjust is happening, because all inequality is evil. And that something unjust that is happening, that leftists believe results in inequality, is what they term oppression. Enter their philosophy of the oppressed versus oppressor. It's rooted in traditional Marxism, but since traditional Marxism doesn't go over well in free market economies where anyone can make it, Western leftists, starting back in the 1930s, believed by focusing solely on economics, Marx missed the huge effect culture has on society. So they took Marxism from pure economics and married it to culture. They believed, as leftists do today, that repression is the essence of a capitalist order, and that in a democracy, undermining Western values can achieve the same thing as violent revolution. In a nutshell, this revised version of Marxism says that inequality in society occurs because prejudice-dominant social groups exploit less powerful social groups, which creates a system of privilege and advantage for some and disadvantage for others. By now, I'm sure everyone knows that the major groups leftists consider privileged in Western societies are whites, males, heterosexuals, wealthier people, native-born, and the dominant religious group, Christians. And they also believe for every privileged group, there's a correlative oppressed group. Privileged groups are seen as loathsome because privilege comes from oppression. On the other hand, oppressed groups are virtuous because seeing them as anything less is victim-blaming, since any shortcomings of an oppressed group stems from inequality, which stems from their oppression by privileged groups.
Yeah, I think the idea of white privilege is absolutely reprehensible. And it's not because white people aren't privileged. We have all sorts of privileges, and most people have privileges of all sorts, and you should be grateful for your privileges and work to deserve them, I would say. But the idea that you can target an ethnic group with a collective crime, regardless of the specific innocence or guilt of the constituent elements of that group, there is absolutely nothing that's more racist than that. It's absolutely abhorrent. I can't... I mean, if you really want to know more about that sort of thing, you should read about the kulaks in the Soviet Union in the 1920s, K-U-L-A-K-S, because they were farmers who were very productive. They were the most productive element of the agricultural strata in Russia, and they were virtually all killed or raped and robbed by the collectivists, who insisted that because they showed signs of wealth, they were criminals and robbers. So, one of the consequences of the prosecution of the kulaks was the death of 6 million Ukrainians from a famine in the 1930s. The idea of collectively held guilt at the level of the individual as a legal or philosophical principle is dangerous. It's precisely the sort of danger that people who are really looking for trouble would push. So, and just a cursory glance at 20th century history should teach anyone who wants to know exactly how unacceptable that is.
So the left's tolerance towards Islam and intolerance towards Christianity is explained by leftist doctrine, their core beliefs. And it boils down to this. Unlike Christians, leftists see Muslims as an oppressed group, and attacking their religion is oppressing them even more.
We have the right to speak out against any ideology that we want to and criticize it for the crimes that it commits, well, people commit in its name. And there's a Christian girl who's a refugee. She was accused of blasphemy and she escaped with her life here in Canada. And can you imagine how she feels when something similar to the blasphemy law that she escaped from is like being implemented here in Canada?
And what's incredible is that, I mean, you've lived through this, you've seen it with your own eyes, and yet you have these predominantly white Canadians that are having a counter-protest about what you're doing, and they're calling people like you and others here racist, bigots, Islamophobes. What's going on? We
come to Canada for a better life. We want to leave that world behind, and we want to celebrate the beauty and the values of this country. And we don't want that horrible, horrible draconian laws to follow us here. Sorry.
So what can they possibly say to you when you point out, listen, I'm originally from Pakistan, I've seen the dark side of Sharia, why are you campaigning against people that are standing up for freedom of speech?
Well, when they call me fascist and they call me a white supremacist, I tell them...
They call you a white supremacist?
A white supremacist. Last time I was here, they're calling me a Nazi scum and a white supremacist. And I'm like, I'm not. How can I be racist against my own people? And they say, it doesn't matter, you still are. And I want to say to them that I'm standing up for my women, my sisters that have died, my sisters that are in jail, the Safia girls. They were Afghani Muslims, and they were killed because their parents thought they were too westernized. It's just a horrible thing. They don't understand. They'll never understand until they live there. They wouldn't even last one day under Sharia law.
So to reiterate, leftists purposely conflate criticizing ideas that are central to Islam and their consequences with Muslims in general, because in their minds, Muslims are a victimized group which they heroically represent, and criticism of their religion is further oppression of a group which they've deemed as part of their collective, part of the new proletariat, as allies in the struggle against an unequal, oppressive, white supremacist, patriarchal, evil capitalist system, which they want to dismantle to its core. And so it makes sense that the so-called tolerant left isn't tolerant to everyone. Why respect the rights of the groups whose power you're trying to smash?
And so if you want to attack me for being overly emotional or for passionately, defending those who are defenseless, then go ahead, you can attack me all you want. But am I saying that I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you, okay? Much better than you. You are garbage.
And by the way, the left's oppressed versus oppressor philosophy is where we get political correctness, which is the result of that philosophy seeping into mainstream society. People are seen as members of groups instead of individuals, and oppressed groups are put on the virtuous pedestal of helpless victims. So a comedian can joke about white stereotypes because whites are a privileged group, but not black stereotypes, or gay, female, immigrant, or Muslim, because those are marginalized / oppressed groups. And so we're back to the, you can say what you want about Christians and Christianity, but Islam is off limits.
Political correctness, after all, aims to tell us what to think. And it seeps into so many parts of society, so often without us even paying attention to its aim. Because the purveyors of political correctness are not imbeciles, because they are smart people armed with clever tricks, we do need to pay more attention. In the last few weeks, some on the left have claimed that those who have raised questions about multiculturalism, immigration and the relationship between Islam and modernity have blood on our hands. I say our hands because I've been named as someone who bears some responsibility for what happened in Oslo. Now here we have murder being used as a muzzle, used to close down free speech. And this is just the latest addition to what is now a growing list of tactics to curb free speech, or and even worse, to stifle genuine inquiry and independent thinking.
I think I should interject here to make clear that not everyone left of the political center are what I've been calling leftists. I mean, it was liberals who coined and began referring to leftists with the pejorative term the regressive left. That being said, leftists, or the regressive left, or cultural Marxists, or SJWs, or whatever you want to call them, aren't some trivial faction of the far left either. Nor are they just harmless, blue-haired college kids with too much time on their hands as they've been described. They propagandize, they proselytize, they vote, and they don't have to convince anyone of the rightness of their arguments because they wield the fear of being labeled a racist and bigot and being ostracized. And not only has this neo-Marxist philosophy seeped into all aspects of left-wing politics and media, it all but dominates universities, where there are no shortages of professors who demonize anything Western. But regardless of how loud the illiberal left screams about how capitalism is responsible for killing and oppressing millions of people, how the American flag stands for hatred and imperialism, and that America is vicious and corrupt, people still vote with their feet. Immigrants want to come here. Which brings me to an interesting point. As leftists, with their victimhood ideology, blame oppression for groups who stay poor, they can't explain why immigrants of various colors can come in at the bottom with very little money and sometimes little knowledge of English and proceed to rise, both in the schools and in the economy. Many immigrant subgroups, like Nigerians, outperform Asians, who outperform whites in medium income and education level. And the Pew Foundation study that leftists often cite as evidence that upward mobility in the U.S. has become stagnant expressly cautions that its findings does not apply to immigrants and their children, for whom the American dream is alive and well.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems.
And the success of many immigrant groups who start at the bottom shows that because there is inequality doesn't mean there is inequity. Inequality means there's a difference. Inequity is injustice. A just government should do something about injustice, like removing structural barriers that unfairly prevent people from achieving in life. This is treating people equally, and this doesn't restrict personal liberty. But leftists want a government that restricts personal liberty by treating people unequally in the name of equality. And that's not only insane, but contrary to the Enlightenment principles our civilization is based on. In the leftist utopia, individualism is replaced by treating people as members of immutable groups, and personal liberty is replaced with governmental control. And those ideals aren't progressive, they're regressive, and always end with a never-ending string of catastrophes. Societies don't flourish without the liberty for individuals to seek their own self-interest. A popular joke in Soviet Russia was, they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work. What leftists fail to realize time and time again is that people are inherently flawed. They believe there's nothing in human nature that would cause us to be unhappy. It's only because we have the wrong institutions. In reality, because of our inherent flaws, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. That's why I'm not saying capitalism and Western civilization is perfect, and I get that compared to someone's imagined utopia, it's pretty filthy. But compared to the state of governance in most places in the world, we're a shining light. And that's because after thousands of years of human civilization, we got some things right, like the concept of the intrinsic value of the individual. And anyone who thinks it's a good idea to abandon the fundamental principles of the best thing we've come up with so far for a resentful collectivist fantasy better first figure out where we're going to find all the infallible angels who will restructure and run society for us.
My final conclusion. Any society that puts equality ahead of freedom will end up with neither equality nor freedom. Any society that puts equality before freedom will end up with neither. On the other hand, a society that puts freedom first will, as a happy byproduct, end up both with greater freedom and greater equality.